Hello, and welcome back to your favorite podcast, Ask the Trade Pose. It's a show where a couple of trade guys ramble on about trade stuff. We're here to answer your questions about HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and any other home system you may have. Occasionally, we'll tell you a joke or two as well, so you can keep your home running smoothly with our advice. I'm Jordan.
I'm Todd. Today we've had a few listeners send in questions about water heaters. Here's what we've been asked. How often should your water heater be serviced? What if you didn't do that and it's been years? How do I properly flush my water heater? And what do you do if your water heater fails? Well, if your water heater fails, if it's summertime, you don't have to do anything till winter.
It's just 95-degree water coming in.
Yeah.
So thanks to our loyal listeners for those questions. These are also things customers ask us in the field all the time, so we're going to get to some of your answers. And no, flushing your water heater is not like flushing your toilet.
Let's start by talking about servicing your water heater. Why should you service your water heater? Well, there's multiple reasons. First reason is efficiency. If your water heater is full of sediment, minerals, or other deposits, that buildup can hinder the efficiency of your unit by insulating the heating element or reducing the flow of water, which then correlates with lifespan. So if you want your water heater to last longer, properly maintaining it, flushing it, etc., helps maintain optimal performance.
So how does some of that garbage get into the water heater? Is there a way I can prevent that? I know out where we're at, we have hard water, right? So that you can't prevent that unless you have some sort of water treatment. What else are they trying to get out of there when they're flushing it?
Well, I think you just hit it on the head there. It's all about how hard our water here is in Tucson. So unless you have a water softener or some sort of water treatment system, there is no real way to keep those deposits or minerals from entering in your water system, as it's coming directly from the city or well or wherever you're getting your water supply from.
So when you're talking about servicing the water heater, then you're talking about flushing it? Now, I know it's different for a tank and tankless, and we'll go over that in a second, but what else should they do when they talk about servicing a water heater, and how often is that service?
Well, I would recommend if it's a tank and tankless, once or twice a year. It seems most people tend to lean towards the once a year flush, which is good. However, I still have seen, even doing it once a year, I've still seen some tanks that have a lot of buildup and a lot of garbage that comes out of those lines.
Now, we'll get to talking about flushing in a second, but are there other things you think they should be doing when it comes to servicing? I know on tankless there's flame sensors and flame rods and exhaust vents and things of that nature.
I guess that, yes, depending on the knowledge of the homeowner, some stuff you want to leave for the professionals, and depending on your knowledge, some stuff you could take a look at and do yourself. When it comes to a tankless water heater, I would recommend anything beyond a flush, calling somebody who actually services those units to come take a look at your flame sensors, igniters, burners, etc. And really, on a tank style water heater, it's sealed. So if you're going to open up that lower compartment, you're going to need to put a new gasket on there. So
you're saying anything beyond the regular flush you'd recommend the professionals do, but there's a lot of things that need to be done, just especially on the tankless water heaters, where there's things recommended by the manufacturers to be done on every servicing.
Yeah, and all of that honestly goes back to warranty as well. So some manufacturers of tank or tankless do actually require some sort of a maintenance program in order to keep and maintain that warranty.
Yeah, we've gotten that a lot. I know that we've been certified by several of the manufacturers, including Navien and Rinnai, and under their policies, they want a licensed, trained service technician to do those kind of servicing on a regular basis in order to guarantee that the product's working. So we've talked a little bit about a servicing. Let's talk a little bit about how to flush a water heater or when to flush a water heater. Flushing a tankless water heater is different than flushing a tank water heater. On a tank water heater, you are just trying to run water through it to remove any sediment buildup, debris that's gotten in there from the city water supply lines. On the tankless, you are actually looking for a chemical clean of the burners in order to maintain efficiency. That's because a tankless water heater gets extremely hot. So anything that's in your water will burn onto that heat exchanger and needs to be cleaned off on a regular basis to keep that tankless working properly. Tell us a little bit how to flush a tank, Todd.
Well, I guess the first thing, if you've never flushed a tank before you start, I would recommend first identifying if it's a gas or an electric. If it's electric, obviously you're going to want to shut off the power. Hopefully you have...
You mean water and electricity don't mix well?
Well, sometimes they do, if you're trying to hurt somebody.
It's better than coffee in the morning, right?
If it was your house, I would make sure we left that power on. So for electric, you're going to want to either pull the disconnect if you have one at your tank, or if not, go to your breaker and locate the breaker for that appliance and shut it off there. If it's gas, you're going to want to shut off your gas shutoff valve, and also make sure you put the gas valve, you're going to want to put that to the pilot position. Next, you're going to want to locate the drain valve at the bottom of your tank. What those are designed for is to hook up a hose to the bottom of that.
No, don't forget that water has to run downhill. And what I mean by this is we do have some customers that come and they try to flush their water heater, but the hose is leaving the water heater and then running uphill. That just won't work.
Yes, water does take the course of gravity. So hook up your hose, and what I always do is once I hook the hose up, I will open that drain cock and let water flow out for a few minutes. That way, if any minerals or deposits are blocking that drain port, you can hope that you're going to flush them out. So let that run for a few minutes. Then what you're going to want to do is shut off your cold water supply, which is entering the tank. Now that's going to then allow the water heater to drain. Once that drains down for a few seconds, you can open your pressure relief valve on the tank to allow it to pull air. Otherwise, it's like having a straw in a cup and holding your finger on the top of the straw.
So let's stop there for a second, Todd, because I know you've been doing this for decades, but our listeners might not be as savvy as we are, so we say. How do you open that water valve, the drain valve at the bottom of the water heater? I know some are different. Some are a quarter turn ball valves, and some are using a screwdriver, et cetera, right?
Again, so that's going to be dependent on brand. Some of the big box stores, they're going to have plastic valves, which hopefully you don't have, but those are going to have a hand knob that you can turn by hand. Some of them are multi-turn and some are quarter turn. If you have a brass drain port, then it's going to be a flathead screwdriver and it's going to be a quarter turn.
Okay, well, that's helpful for the customers. Now, you talked about the cold water shutoff, too. Well, most of our listeners may or may not know there's a gate valves and quarter-turn ball valves and all that. So they're going to have to recognize the type of shutoff you have on the cold water side and how you have to turn it. So the quarter-turn valves is obviously that. It's just a quarter turn. It's a lever. It's perpendicular when it's closed and parallel when it's opened. The gate valves are a round knob that's on there that you have to crank multiple times and often fail. So sometimes they do not shut the water off, even when they're open or closed, depending on the age of the gate valve.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables and stuff that can go wrong with obviously any job. So I left off at the point of shutting off the cold water supply. So once you shut off the cold water supply and start draining, open your pressure relief valve and also go inside and turn one or multiple faucets onto the hot position to allow it to pull air and drain faster that way. Once the water drains out, then you're going to obviously refill, open that cold supply valve back up, let it fill up, and even when it's filling up, it's still going to be removing debris and sediment that was still trapped. So I would let that run for a few minutes with the drain cock still open, so it's draining out. And really, once you see the end of the hose and you have clear water running out, then you can close that drain port, go ahead and close your pressure relief valve, leave your hot water faucets on and let it fill up. You do want to make sure you leave your hot water faucets on because now the tank is going to have air in it. So you will hear sputtering coming out of your pipes, which is completely normal. Don't get scared.
It's not going to blow up on you, is it?
No, hopefully not.
But if it does, call a professional, right?
Yeah, you never know. So once you're letting it run and it's filling and you hear no air sputtering out of the faucets, close your hot water faucets, and then you're going to want to relight the water heater or flip the breaker if it's electric.
Now, relighting that pilot light usually has instructions on the water heater how to do that. It's pretty straightforward. If you don't know how to do it, you can always call your trade professionals to help you with that.
If it's an electric water heater, it's pretty straightforward. And if it's not an electric water heater and you have a plate where you have to stick a match in there, I think it's probably time to replace that water heater.
Yeah. Well, who doesn't want a bomb in their house, right? It's just a water bomb waiting to blow up. So when it comes to flushing a tankless, it's a different setup. Tankless need a chemical flush. Now, there are chemicals you can use, or you can use a restaurant-grade vinegar. We always recommend the vinegar. It's a little less aggressive than the chemicals, but it also depends on the kind of sediment buildup you have on your heat exchanger exchanger and the hardness of your water. If you have very hard water, you may need to actually use those chemicals to get that heat exchanger working properly. A tankless water heater that isn't flushed regularly will fail prematurely. We see it a lot. They get brown buildup, they get mineral buildups, failures of the seals, other things that happen because they weren't flushed on a regular basis. And it's not the same as a regular, obviously, tank water heater because you do need a pump, you do need a discharge bucket, you do need hoses. It's a little more complex than just a tank water heater flush.
Yes, it is. So I would recommend on any tankless flush, if you want a full service and want your flame sensors and igniters inspected, I would always recommend calling a professional for that.
Yeah, I would too. And also check your professionals. Based on your brand, there are certain professionals in your local area that say they're professionals, but there's also many that should be certified by the manufacturer. I know that we've gone through special training programs and all that to be certified in the techniques that each manufacturer deems appropriate for their tankless. They're not all the same, and obviously they're different than what a general plumber may do if he or she has never had that kind of training. Okay, so we've talked about the basics of flushing, water heaters, not toilets. But what other kind of failures could we have on water heaters, and what should we do here?
I would say the most common failures that I've come across or problems related to flushing, if it's gas, it's going to be a thermocouple that fails. So we get a lot of calls or people have problems with, they say they have hot water one day and then they relight the pilot and the next day it's out again. So if you're coming across a problem like that, more than likely it's a thermocouple or a thermal pile, depending on brand and age, which can easily be replaced. If it's a tankless, a newer tankless, you're going to be getting an error code that it should show with a message that tells you exactly what's wrong with it, whether it's a venting problem or ignition problem, etc.
Yeah, on the tankless, I found dead birds, I found lizards, I found bugs, flying creatures all filling that venting system. If the cap on the venting system isn't good, then anything can get in there. And even if it is good, some of these, we're out in Arizona, we like to have these woodpeckers that eat their way through things. They can punch a hole right through there. And the next thing you know, any creature that's out there, it just makes a nice home of this warm tunnel that's coming out of the machine.
Yeah, I remember one time I was servicing a furnace, a little different story here, but same concept. You have your vent running through the roof and there was no metal screen covering the vent. So the customer was complaining about a smell and I walked in and 10 feet away, I could smell it smelled like a dead animal. So I opened up the furnace, start inspecting, and the smell was horrible. Finally, I came to the draft inducer, removed it, and wouldn't you know, about a 10-inch long pack rat, which was pretty fresh. It was dead, but it was horrible. And I had to put gloves on and remove that thing. And yeah, so anything could happen.
Yeah, and there's other failures, flue pipe failures, venting failures. You'll find a lot of different failures. So once you, as a consumer, the regular thing you should do is flush it. But the other failures, most of the time, I'm going to say call a professional. They involve a little bit more work, and you want to make sure that it's done correctly. Some repairs, like tank water heaters, for example, once you get past a certain age, it's not really worth even a minor repair anymore because you don't know the condition of the tank. It could be rusted. It could be leak prone. Tankless, you can see a little bit more. You can work on them a little bit more. They're a little bit easier to tell the condition of the tankless.
So if you run into any problems or you're unsure what you're looking at with your water heater, it's always best to consult with your local trade pro.
Thanks again for listening to Ask the Trade Pros, your favorite podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe or follow us wherever you listen to the podcast. And we also recommend that you leave the excellent 5-star review.
So if you got a topic you want us to cover, send us a message and we may talk about it in a future episode. Check out the show notes for our contact details.
And as always, thank you to the generous folks at Done Right Services for sponsoring this podcast and making it all possible.